All right. Good morning. Thank you for coming in. So this is Miss Moore. So she's a radiologist. Well, I'll let you introduce. What is your position?
So my name is Miss Moore, and I am a radiologic technologist. Sounds fancy, but it basically means that I can take X-rays, and so that's what my degree is in.
How many of you have ever had an X-ray? Wow, lots of people.
Oh my word, lots of you. Wow.
All right, so we have your official job title. Thank you. So what kind of educational background and degrees do you have that you needed for this field?
So in order to be a certified and licensed radiologic technologist, you have to have an associate's degree in radiology, and this is a science major. And so if you like science, you know, it would be fun for you. I really love science, so it's one of the reasons I chose this profession. But I do love radiology, and you have to have an associate. You can continue to grow in your education. You could do CAT scans, ultrasounds, all kinds of different areas in radiology to look at the human body. But I stuck with plain radiology, which is where you take just x-rays of bones. So it's very simple. I stuck with that because that was my favorite.
Okay, and what does a typical work week or work day look like for you? Like, what kind of paperwork, lab work, community involvement did you have?
Okay, so when you work in the health field, whether it's a nurse, for me, radiology, doctors, they're really long days. So most of my days are 12-hour shifts, and that's a long time, right? So I would work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and sometimes I would even work overnight, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And you know what they call that? They call that the graveyard shift because it's so quiet and it's dark outside. And so we work long shifts, 12-hour shifts. And what happens we call it a unit, so it's like this big area where all the doctors send us their orders. And so we call it the unit, and we would go into the unit area, and on this little printer, or sometimes on our screen, depending where we're going to take the x-ray, an order would come through. And it may say the patient's name, and it'll say left elbow x-ray. Okay, so we would know, okay, we've got to go take the left elbow x-ray. And so we would go to the patient and x-ray their elbow or whatever it is, knee, stomach, chest, head, all different kinds of x-rays. And we would do that, and then you would do something called processing. And back in the day, not now, not what I do, but back in the day, you used to have to be in a really dark room. They called it a dark room. And they would develop this picture in a dark room. And it took forever. It took forever. But now, guess what we do? We take the film that the picture's on, we tuck it into an electronic machine. It's kind of like a Polaroid, you know, how quick it is. And it reads it, and it pops up on a computer screen, and you can see your picture, if it's good or not. If it's a terrible picture, guess what you have to do? Do what? Redo it. You've got to redo it. And so in your day, you learn all of the things that you need to take a good picture. And when you're taking a picture, it's actually a machine that creates radiation, like these beams of radiation that go through your body to see your bones. It's incredible. And so you learn the science behind, okay, for this patient, that's a big elbow. I'm going to have to use more power, right? And so you learn how much radiation you need to push through the human body to see what happens if I have a real big person and they're like, Miss Moore, we need a picture of their abdomen because we think they're sick. And I'm like, okay, so I have to have more push of that radiation. So you learn all the science behind taking these pictures and what to do to make them look good. So we do that all day long. Take pictures all day long. Lots of walking. I think I have walked close to 20 miles in a day all over the hospital. And but it is really rewarding to get to help people. Do you know what they say about radiology techs? They say that we are the key to healing. Do you know why? Because how many of you have had an x-ray because you fell off the monkey bars? Just curious. Or you fell skating, or you were on a trampoline. So did you know that those are the 3 leading reasons children have x-rays? Trampolines, skating, or monkey bars. 3 leading reasons. And did you know that if a radiology tech, myself, would not take your picture, you couldn't get better, right? So they say that we're the eyes, and we're the key to healing. So every doctor has to see an x-ray in order to treat you appropriately, right? So I love being that to people. As far as paperwork's minimal now. It's computerized. Sometimes the orders come through on paper, but not very often. It's all on the computer. And then as far as the community involvement, unless the hospital does a fair, there's really not a whole lot that we would do, as far as community involvement. Sometimes there's job fairs. That's it.
How does your job affect the community?
That's a great question. I think it would be the other way around. I think the community affects our job. And this is why I say this, y'all, it's real. They actually, if it's like Halloween night, which by the way it's about to be, if it's Halloween night, did you know that there are more x-rays done on big days like that? Halloween, Christmas, New Year's Eve, like for some reason, full moons. I don't know why. But did you know that there are more x-rays done on those days because people tend to be more adventurous and more outgoing, and you might trip and fall. But I think depending on what's happening in the community, it really does affect what happens at the hospital. And so they do say that, like typical Halloween nights, holidays, full moons, those typically upload our caseload, our patients. And so it's interesting, based on what happens in the community, it really does affect how heavy our workload is.
Okay.
So.
But does your job have an impact on the community?
I think just being helpful. More than anything, we are the eyes. As radiology techs, we are the key to healing. And so it's like if we don't take care of our community members that come see us, then you can't be treated appropriately. So it's, I think in that aspect, there are, x-ray is used for everything, y'all. If you fall and get your head hurt, you get an x-ray. If you are really, really sick, you can get x-rays. The x-ray is used for a lot of different reasons. So we can definitely, I feel like we help the community heal based on the job.
Very good. And do you have any recommendations for students who would want to have a job like yours in the future?
I would just say that if you love science, radiology would be such a fun degree for you. It is very rewarding because like I said, without us, doctors can't do their job. And so it's super rewarding. And if you love helping people, it's a job for you because you do help so much. You help. So it's really good. It's good.
All right. And then I've got a couple other questions
Yeah,
for you.
for sure.
And they're all STEM related. So
Okay.
you're studying. So what are some of the things that are important in science? Because you mentioned you use a lot of science, and if the kids like science, it's a great job for them. So what exactly do they use from science?
Okay. Well, I will tell you, in science, you're going to learn about cells and molecules. And so radiation, which is the substance that comes out of the machine, and it's created by wires and electrons. You'll learn all this in science, but basically those electrons come together. Have you ever seen the Hulk, the story of Hulk?
Yeah.
You know how Hulk gets those gamma rays and all of a sudden he's powerful? Okay, well, it's not exactly like that. But pretend that stuff comes out of a machine, and basically you learn in science, the science behind it is how does that radiation affect your body? And it's actually pretty interesting. They say that if you were to get a chest x-ray, which is a picture of your chest, if you have like a pneumonia or a bad cough for a long time, did you know the radiation that comes in and affects your body would be the same radiation you would get if you were outside at recess for 24 hours. So the sun also puts off a type of radiation. But anyway, in science, you learn how that radiation comes in and affects your bodies. We also, our machines work on simple machines. Our machines that create that radiation and move, our machines move, like the big cameras move, using pulleys, using levers, all kinds of simple machines, and that's something that you'll learn also in science. So it's pretty interesting.
Awesome, thank you. Now, what about math? What kind of math does your job require? What do you use math-wise in radiology?
So in math, there are these certain equations. You know, I think right now you guys are adding and subtracting 3-digit numbers, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So in math, though, in radiology, remember earlier when I told you have big patients, you have little patients, you know, sizes of the body. So when that radiation comes out of the machine, you have to calculate. It's called mass. It's called mass. You calculate the mass and you calculate the kilowatts, which is the push. So when you calculate that in your head, there's a certain equation that you have to use to say, okay, this body part, like my leg right here, is however many centimeters thick, and I have to know how much radiation to push in order to penetrate the skin and all the fat and the muscle to see the bone, if that makes sense. So there are certain equations that we use, and math skills that you're learning right now, you would use in this field because you do have to perform equations. Now, I'll tell you, when I first started radiology, there was a lot more math I had to use, and now the machines do math for you. So it's pretty interesting to calculate that, but I will tell you there's some errors in the machine that's not always right. So you still have to know your math. You still have to do those equations and figure out the best way to get a good picture.
Awesome, very good. And then in technology, you've already said some aspects of what kind of technology you use. Can you tell if there's any other technology that's used for your job?
Absolutely. So there is a camera, we call it the tube, because we think of Hulk in this big tube pushing out, you know, all kinds of strengthening stuff. But it's a big, huge camera, and y'all, there are cords this big around that hook to the ceiling into a big unit. And so there's a huge camera, and this camera will roll this way, goes up and down, can turn all kinds of ways. And there's buttons on there that you push to make it move like that. And so however the patient is sitting comfortably, you can move your camera all the way around to fit and get a picture. And then the other thing is, you know, when you have a camera, you also have to have film, right? Okay, so when that radiation comes out of the tube or the camera, it hits a film, and they're like long rectangular. I'm looking at your Chromebook. It kind of looks like that. Hold that up for me. It looks just like that, and they're all different sizes, and they're about that thick, and so that's perfect. That's great. So they kind of look like that. They're rectangles, and y'all can put them down. You can use different sizes based on the body part that you're taking a picture of, and then what you do is there's this big machine, and you drop that rectangle film into that machine, and it takes it out, it reads it, puts it up on the computer, and puts it back in clean for the next patient. And so other than that, there is a table, and this table has a superpower also. The table moves. It, like, you can move the patient on the table. So if you push a button on the floor, it will like move the patient around. So if you have your camera and your tube set, and you're like, I need to move it just a little bit, you can move the patient instead of the camera. So there's the camera or the tube where all the radiation comes out, and then there's the cassette or the film that holds the picture. There's the processor that develops the picture of the x-ray, and then there's the table that will move for easy access to the body part.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then when we think about engineering, we think about engineering as always answering a problem or a question and trying to solve it. How in your job did they use engineering to solve a problem?
I think that this is a great question. In fact, how many of you, when you were x-rayed, it was your elbow? I'm just curious. Okay, so look, when you were x-rayed, was it really hard to straighten your arm? Because it hurt, right? So this is what this whole system of simple machines and all the things put together help us with. So if you're unable to straighten your arm all the way, technically, we can't consider that a good picture. But guess what the camera does? When you're like this, how many of you were like this? And they're like, it's okay, don't push anymore, right? Yep, see? So if you're like this, our cameras can shift to see what we need to see, even if the patient's unable to get comfortable in a position. And so really, I think problem solving is a huge part of being a radiology tech, because patients come in with all kinds of injuries, all kinds of sicknesses, and based on the patient, you really have to problem solve to get the best picture for the doctor. So, and it's, that part to me is fun. Because you never know what you're going to get. So every day is kind of a new day, and it's new stories, new sicknesses, new injuries, and so it's just a constant effort to problem solve. So
Awesome, thank you so much. And do you have time to answer some questions?
yeah,
that the kids
sure,
have?
I would love
All right,
that.
so they were supposed to write just their first initial and last initial, large enough for you to see it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you have a question, you're only raising up a board that has your first initial and last initial, because you're gonna ask your question when she calls on you. So she wants to see that first letter of your first name, the last letter of your last name, and then you will ask your question. She doesn't need to see the question.
Okay.
Okay? So go ahead, and if you have a question, raise your board up so she can see your initials.
All right. BH, what's your question?
How do you know that a bone is broken?
Ooh, great question. So the bone, every bone in your body has really clear, we call them margins. And have y'all ever had to trace something where the outside is bold and the inside is, you could color it in? Okay, that's kind of what a bone looks like. And so on the outside it's very clear, but when it's broken, that bold margin is actually open, and you can see like a hole in it. And so that's how you know if it's broken. There's usually some different colors of gray or black that you would see. But that's how you know it's broken. You look at the outside of the bone and you can see that margin is messed up. So, H.O. Love it. I love it. I love what I do. That's a great question. BL.
So
I'll come back to you. Think about it. I'll come back to you. EP.
you said the radiation in your chest would be the same as like being outside at least for 24 hours. And you said like the sun reflects radiation, but what about the moon?
The moon actually does not reflect radiation, because the moon's light comes from the sun. So the sun is the Earth's biggest source of radiation. It's actually pretty cool. How many of you have ever been in an airplane? Yeah. So they say that you actually acquire radiation when you're on an airplane, but none of these doses are dangerous. You would have to calculate your radiation dose for a whole lifetime in order for it to be like a dangerous dose. A lot of people get concerned about that if they've had a lot of x-rays, but you don't have to be worried about that. It's not a big deal. BB, coming back to you, BL. Sorry, I forgot you.
And how many bones have you seen actually broken?
Thousands. Probably thousands. Thousands, and some can heal just by getting in a cast. Some end up having to have surgery, depending on how bad it is. Yeah, but thousands. BL.
So I have a question, since my brother broke a tumor before in his knee.
Uh-huh.
So, after you like tell your patient, what do you do after you get the picture?
Oh, that's a great idea. So if I x-ray somebody and they have a broken bone, usually there is a doctor that's immediate. So right with me that will say, hey, we're gonna put you in a cast and this is what's going on. Sometimes if they're like on my x-ray table and it's super, super bad, it's a very bad break, I won't let them move. I'll say, hey, I just want you to hang out for a second and I'm gonna go get the doctor. And we would get the doctor to help them get more stable before they move. That's great. SS. Let me come back to you. Okay, CC.
What's the bone that you've seen broken the most?
The wrist. The wrist is the most common broken bone. You know why? Because when people fall, they fall on their outstretched hand, and it almost always, the first question you say, did you fall like this? And if they say yes, you can almost guarantee it's broken. It's pretty interesting. SS.
What's your heaviest bone?
Your strongest bone is your femur bone. It's in your thigh. And they usually say that you would have to fall from 12 feet or higher in order to break this bone. So this bone is rarely broken unless it's a bad, like sometimes car accident or a bad, really tall fall. But this bone is very rarely broken.
Okay, we have time for
One more. CF.
What's your favorite part?
What's my favorite part about it? I think my favorite part about radiology is just knowing that when I do my job well, that I'm helping someone.